When one thinks of classical mythology, the image that will normally come to mind is that of tales of gods and heroes. However, it is also important to consider the mythical landscape that these gods and heroes inhabited, and that ancient Mediterranean peoples such as the Greeks and Romans believed to continue to be the world around them. In the prior episode, we took a look at the titan named Prometheus, and we mentioned the process by which his brother Epimetheus designed animals. Thus, we shall continue with that theme in this episode with the zoology of classical mythology. Most mythical creatures that the Greeks and their Roman successors considered real were believed to inhabit distant lands that they were vaguely aware of through diplomacy, trade routes, and even adventurous travelers such as Herodotus. Some of these fantastic beasts may have been Greek inventions, whereas others originally belonged to the indigenous communities of other cultures, and were later incorporated into the mythology of the Greeks and Romans. We shall consider these strange species one region at a time. Our starting point shall be Egypt, which was highly influential on the society of the Greeks and features in the myths of Io, the Danaids, and Typhon. Greek texts, the most detailed version written by Herodotus, mention a bird connected to Egypt called the phoenix. Herodotus admits in his account that he never personally saw a phoenix, but he asserts that he can describe it from the artwork that he encountered in Egypt. While he expresses some uncertainty over whether this art portrays the phoenix as it really looks, Herodotus states that it shows the phoenix with both golden and red feathers, and that the shape and size are similar to an eagle. The reason that he states that he cannot guarantee the accuracy of the artistic renditions is that phoenixes only show up in Egypt every 500 years. A much later Greek writer, Aelian, emphasizes that phoenixes can instinctively tell when 500 years have passed, despite having no knowledge of numbers. In the opinion of Herodotus, phoenixes flew to Egypt at the time of the deaths of their fathers. Phoenixes, Herodotus claims, normally live in Arabia. When their fathers die, they shape eggs made out of myrrh of the maximum weight that they believe that they will be able to lift. After testing that they can lift the eggs, the phoenixes will hollow them out and place their fathers inside. The phoenixes then place more myrrh around the eggs that they designed and fly to Egypt, where they leave their fathers. Pliny the Elder, one of the most eclectic authors of the Roman Empire, tells a tale about the phoenix that was recent in his day. At the time that Quintus Plautius and Sextus Papinius were consuls, a phoenix was found arriving in Egypt. It was then brought to Emperor Claudius, who put it on display in the Forum in the city of Rome. Greek and Roman authors also wrote accounts of a serpent called the basilisk, which was said to dwell in Libya. Physically, it is unimposing at only 12 inches with a white spot on its head. However, it moves around differently from other snakes in that it keeps the middle of its body raised, and it has a horrifying effect as it does so. Bushes die, grass is set ablaze, and stones fly apart, all from the effect of both its touch and its breath. Furthermore, its hiss scares off any other snake. This is likely because even the longest snake will shrivel up from the breath of the basilisk. Similarly, a person can simply be holding an object, and the basilisk need only bite this object to kill a person. In one instance, a man on a horse killed a basilisk with his spear, and both he and the horse perished. Still, there are ways of successfully dealing with a basilisk that will not in turn kill the person. It was reported that the basilisk is afraid of roosters, specifically of their crow. Thus, those traveling through Libya often kept a rooster on their journeys for safety. Additionally, despite the monstrous toxins of the basilisk, the weasel is, in fact, toxic to this terrifying serpent. Those who came across basilisks would toss them into the burrow of weasels. This kills a basilisk and is the only safe means of doing so. Once a basilisk is dead, it is rendered harmless. Kings themselves were known to seek dead basilisks just for the experience of perceiving one. Let us now journey to Ethiopia, which the Greeks knew as the birthplace of figures such as Phaethon, Andromeda, and Memnon. Pliny the Elder mentions a fairly large beast he calls the Catoblaipas that lives in Ethiopia. It can barely move its own limbs and struggles to lift its head, but is nonetheless a terrifying creature. Any person who looks at the Catoblaipas instantly dies. According to Aelian, Ethiopia is also inhabited by incredible snakes that are 180 feet in length. Aelian notes the long lifespans of these snakes and mentions that they are capable of bringing down elephants. Smaller, albeit still massive, snakes of 60 feet were said to reside in Phrygia in modern-day Turkey. Leaving their dens in the summertime, they bask by the river Rhine-Darcus with their mouths wide open. A form of magic lures in birds for them to devour. At night, these same Phrygian serpents feast on flocks of sheep and even their herdsmen. The Greeks were intrigued by India, which features especially in the myths about Dionysus, among a few others. It is here that the manticore lives. The manticore is notable for its strength and courage. Manticores are the size of lions and have shaggy red fur. Both of their jaws feature 3 sets of large and sharp teeth. Especially unusual are their faces, which look human with blue-grey eyes and large shaggy ears. However, their claws are reminiscent of a lion. One last feature of the manticore that must be mentioned is its stinger, which it fights with alongside its claws. The stinger is like that of a scorpion and is a cubit long or 18 inches. Both sides of its tail feature stingers as well as its head. All stings from the manticore are instantly fatal. Elephants alone survive. Manticore stingers, just like their claws, grow back after being used. India has a large population of manticores, so the inhabitants of India hunted them with spears and arrows while riding elephants. Another creature that can be found in India is the griffin, a quadrupedal bird the size of a wolf. Griffins have the claws of a lion and both red and black feathers. They guard gold in the mountains of India, and they can also be found in Scythia or the northeastern regions of Europe. Herodotus famously reports that India has ants that look like Greek ants, albeit somewhere in size between foxes and dogs. He claims that they dig through sand that contains gold. The king of Persia, Herodotus also relates, had a number of these ants as pets. A contemporary of Herodotus, named Ctesias, who also wrote about India, mentions gigantic worms swimming in the river Indus. Ctesias states that they are generally around 7 cubits long, although they vary in length. These worms have a single tooth on both their lower and upper jaws, and they come out at night to feast on animals such as camels and oxen, failing to consume only the intestines of their prey. According to Ctesias, people in India catch these worms with large hooks, using small livestock as bait, and hang them up for 30 days to collect oil for the king of India. No one else is permitted to use this oil, but it can set anything ablaze, and the fire it creates can only be put out with mud alone. Other aquatic creatures were said to live in and around India. This includes eels in the river Ganges, 300 feet long. Off the coast of India, Pliny the Elder says that there are lobsters 6 feet long. sharks hundreds of feet long, and whales that are 3 acres across. Aelian mentions sea monsters 5 times as big as an elephant, with fins that are 7 cubits, jaws that are 15 cubits, and ribs that are 20 cubits. As can be seen, the Greeks and the Romans believed in many strange creatures in the lands that were, to them, the edges of the known world. These beasts sometimes originated in the lore of the lands in question, and sometimes were Greek to begin with, but they came to inhabit the Greco-Roman mythological landscape regardless. In the next episode, we shall return to the gods and look at the Olympian pantheon upon its assumption of control over the cosmos.